Imagine yourself stranded on a desolate island, surrounded by nothing but endless ocean. Your only hope of rescue vanished years ago, leaving you to fend for yourself in isolation. Yet, against all odds, you not only survived, but thrived in this harsh environment. This is Fatal Tragedies, with the 3 most tragic island stories in human history. The Mystery of Easter Island. Throughout history, people have changed their surroundings to suit their needs, but on Easter Island, using up the unique environment too much led to the collapse of the community's food sources. Usually on big lands, people can move according to the seasons or to escape from others. However, on islands, moving around is hard because there's not much land or food, especially in the sea around them. Easter Island's story isn't fully told without considering the beliefs of its people. Like other Pacific cultures, their history is deeply intertwined with the belief in a mystical other world. This belief, combined with the island's extreme isolation, led to a tragic end. This story is a powerful example of what happens when faith and nature clash in a small space. The end of the land. Easter Island, known as Rapa Nui to its inhabitants, stands out for its ecological downfall on a 67-square-mile volcanic island in the vast South Pacific. It's home to 3 large volcanoes, Tierra, Poiki, and Ranokau, along with 73 smaller volcanic cones, marking its dramatic volcanic origin. In the late 1200s, its isolation led its people to believe that they were at the end of the land. For centuries, the Rapa Nui people, after the last group of settlers arrived, didn't encounter anyone else from outside, thinking themselves the Earth's sole inhabitants, aside from the seabirds that visited seasonally, aligning with the austral solstice. The giant moai statues on Rapa Nui are believed to represent the ancestors, essentially the clan leaders who have passed away. According to local belief, these ancestors gained mana, a supernatural force over nature, from the chief god Makimaki. This power was then shared with their living descendants. The island's supreme religious leader, along with the clan chiefs, were the primary holders of this mana. Notably, the religious leader wasn't a political leader, but held significant mana, using it to enforce community-benefiting prohibitions or taboos. Most of the moai statues on Easter Island were placed on altars or stone platforms facing away from the sea, a practice that began around the years 1100 to 1200. These statues mostly represented male ancestors, each uniquely named, as were their altars. The moais were believed to gain their protective power or mana once their eyes were inserted, safeguarding their descendants and resources. Creating these massive statues and altars emphasized the importance of understanding family lineage and the clan's hierarchy. However, the drive to showcase power and prestige through the moais eventually put a strain on the environment. The clans overused their resources by cutting down trees for statue quarries, altar construction, and moving the statues, leading to a scarcity of essential resources like wood and food, and causing conflict over these basic needs. And here's where the problem began. Well, at least that's the story we all know, the collapse story. The new one's a little different and far scarier. A story of success? 2 experts from the University of Hawaii, Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, think differently about Easter Island. They believe what happened there wasn't a total disaster, but actually a surprising success story. Professors Hunt and Lipo believe that fossil hunters and paleobotanists haven't found solid proof that the first Polynesian settlers burned down the forest for farming on Easter Island. Instead of blaming humans, they point their fingers at rats. Yep, you heard that right. Rats. Specifically, Polynesian rats that hitched a ride on those settlers' canoes. These rats, according to Hunt and Lipo, went on a rampage once they landed, munching through trees and multiplying like crazy without any natural predators to stop them. As a reviewer in the Wall Street Journal reported, in laboratory settings, Polynesian rat populations can double in 47 days. So, throw a breeding pair onto an island with no natural predators and an abundance of food, and math will suggest the result. If the animals multiplied as they did in Hawaii, the authorities calculate, Easter Island would quickly have housed between 2 and 3 million. Among the favorite food sources of the Polynesian rats are tree seeds and tree sprouts. Humans surely cleared some of the forests, but the real damage would have come from the rats that prevented new growth. With the trees disappearing, so did 20 other types of plant from the forest, along with 6 land birds and various seabirds. Despite this loss of diversity in food options, the people of Easter Island persisted in their way of life. Surprisingly, food wasn't their main concern, even with much narrower diets available. Rat meat, anybody? Despite the challenge they faced, the Easter Island inhabitants found innovative ways to sustain themselves. Archaeologists discovered that a significant portion of the discarded bones found in ancient garbage heaps belonged to introduced rats, providing the islanders with a meat substitute. Additionally, despite the island's limited water and nutrient-poor soil, the people utilized stones, breaking them into small pieces and scattering them across open fields. This created uneven surfaces that, when combined with sea winds, promoted turbulent airflow, releasing vital mineral nutrients from the rocks into the soil. These scattered rock gardens covered about 1/10 of the island and proved to be effective in supporting basic vegetable crops. In fact, they were so successful that they sustained a population density comparable to areas like Oklahoma, Colorado, Sweden, and New Zealand today. Remarkably, analyses of Easter Island skeletons from that era reveal lower levels of malnutrition compared to people in Europe. Even when a Dutch explorer, Jacob Roggeveen, visited in 1722, he noted that the islanders weren't begging for food, but rather desired European hats. This suggests that starvation wasn't a widespread issue among the population. Furthermore, the fact that they had the time and energy to carve and transport massive stone statues around the island indicates a level of societal stability and resourcefulness that contradicts the image of a society on the brink of collapse. Now, I know what you're wondering. Why is this a success story? According to the Hawaiian anthropologists, even though Easter Island faced tough times and its environment suffered, its clans and families stayed together. While the island became quieter and the ecosystem was badly hurt, the people didn't vanish. They adapted. Without enough wood for canoes or as many birds to hunt, and lacking coconuts, they managed to survive on rat meat and small amounts of veggies. They made the best of what they had. But here's a puzzling question. If everybody had enough to eat, why did the population decrease? The professors suggest it might have been due to diseases spread by European visitors. Now let's pause for a second and consider these scenarios, not just about Easter Island's past, but also about our planet's future. The first, where nature collapse, is something that nobody wants. But what about this new idea, where people harm the environment but somehow manage to keep going? Is it really better? In some ways, I find this success story just as worrisome. Now, speaking of worrisome, our next story will shock you even more. Stranded on the Isle of Sand. Welcome to Tromelin Island, once known as the Isle of Sand for its desolate appearance. In 1761, around 100 individuals taken from their homeland found themselves abandoned here, with most never to be heard from again. In July of that year, Captain Jean de la Fogue, commanding a French ship, faced a dilemma with conflicting maps. Departing from Madagascar's eastern coast, he battled strong winds and darkness, leading to a wayward course. Despite the lack of reliable maps, time constraints pushed him to press on, unaware of the imminent danger. Tasked with transporting beef and rice from the Isle of France to Madagascar, Captain Jean had a clandestine plan. He intended to make a lucrative stop at Rodriguez Island, carrying an extra load of Malagasy captives below deck. This illegal scheme promised substantial profits, but carried significant risks. As Captain Jean grappled with navigation, his crew diligently followed orders, oblivious to the impending catastrophe. Had he exercised patience, Tromelin Island, directly in their path, might have been spotted, altering the course of history. Indeed, it wasn't Tromelin Island itself that posed the greatest threat, but rather the reef lurking just beneath the surface. Captain Jean discovered its unforgiving nature when rough seas caused the ship to collide with the reef, dealing a fatal blow. Despite the majority of the crew and the captain making it to the safety of the island, 18 men were swept away by the storm and drowned. Tragically, many of the captives had no means of escape from the rushing waters, and those who could fled through the breach in the reef. As the ship sank, almost half of the remaining captives were trapped in the cargo hold and drowned. With the dawn revealing the full extent of their plight, over 120 crew members and between 60 and 80 Malagasy survivors found themselves stranded on what was then known as the Isle of Sand. This desolate island, discovered by France in the 1720s, is situated in the remote reaches of the Indian Ocean, devoid of vegetation and wildlife. Its minuscule size and lack of elevation made spotting passing ships impossible, while its harsh climate offered little respite from the scorching sun and relentless winds, exacerbated by frequent cyclones and storms during the summer months. Upon reaching the island, Captain John's behavior became increasingly erratic, burdened by the realization of failed smuggling and the prospect of facing legal consequences. Eventually, he suffered a mental breakdown, prompting the crew to relieve him of command. His first lieutenant, Barthélemy, took charge, organizing survival efforts and salvaging supplies from the wreck. Despite their shared ordeal, a stark social divide persisted, with the crew withholding food and water from the Malagasy captives. Efforts to build a seaworthy vessel, aptly named the Providence, took shape, offering hope of escape. On September 27th, almost 2 months after the stranding, the Providence set sail, leaving behind the surviving Malagasy with the promise of rescue. However, during the journey back to Madagascar, an illness spread aboard the Providence, claiming the lives of several crew members, including Captain Jean. Following the tragedy of the shipwreck, Barthélemy assumed leadership but faced disdain from the Isle of France governor upon their return. Despite his efforts to secure a rescue mission for the stranded Malagasy, the governor's refusal, fueled by wartime constraints, left them abandoned. Stranded for years, they carved out a rudimentary existence, constructing shelters and adapting to their hostile environment. Living amidst adversity, the Malagasy's resourcefulness and resilience were evident in their survival tactics. Despite initial oversights, they persevered, utilizing seabirds and turtles as primary food sources. However, their population dwindled due to sickness or malnutrition, and rescue attempts ended in tragedy, leaving them resigned to their fate. Their isolation was finally shattered when Captain Jacques-Marie Baudelaire de Trumelin arrived in 1776, discovering only 7 survivors. Despite years of solitude, their ingenuity was evident in the artifacts unearthed by archaeological expeditions, revealing their remarkable ability to endure and adapt to unimaginable circumstances. Tromelin Island, once an emblem of tragedy, has become a testament to human resilience, offering insights into the enduring spirit of those who face the harshest of challenges. Though much of their story remains shrouded in mystery, the legacy of the Malagasy survivors lives on, immortalized in the sands of time. Now picture yourself standing in shallow water on the edge of a tiny island. You watch as your only way off, your ship, fades away into the distant horizon. No matter how much you yell or how desperately you beg, it's not turning back. Now, imagine this island is far away with nobody else around, right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Do you think you could survive? And if you did, how long would it be before you went completely insane? This is what happened to Alexander Selkirk on Tierra Island. Alexander, born in 1676 in Scotland, had a rebellious streak from a young age. He often got into trouble, once even facing charges for indecent conduct in a church. Despite his intelligence and talent for navigation, he defied his father's wishes to join the family business and instead embarked on a career at sea. Joining pirates and later becoming a privateer, Selkirk sailed the South Seas, gaining a reputation as a skilled navigator. Eventually, he joined Captain William Dampier's crew as a sailing master. However, tensions arose between the captains, leading to a disagreement and close calls with enemy ships. In 1704, during a mission to attack a Spanish gold mining town, a series of mistakes by Captain William led to an ambush. When William called for a retreat, Captain Thomas Stradling blamed him for the failure, and tension between them reached a breaking point. On May 18th, after capturing a small boat, a disagreement over keeping its supplies led to a massive argument. Finally, Captain Thomas decided to part ways, ending their partnership and setting sail in a different direction. The island Alexander ultimately chose to stay with Captain Thomas, believing him to be the better option despite his inexperience. However, when the crew stopped at Tierra Island for repairs, Selkirk disagreed with Thomas's makeshift repairs to the boat. Concerned about the ship's condition, Selkirk decided to stay on the island rather than risk sailing on a dangerous vessel. Despite his attempts to convince Thomas to make proper repairs, Selkirk was left behind when the ship departed. He pleaded to be taken back on board, but was mocked by Thomas, who saw Selkirk's actions as mutiny. With only a chest of supplies, including bedding, clothing, a rifle, a hatchet, and a navigational tool, Selkirk found himself marooned on the uninhabited island. Initially hopeful that the ship would return for him, Selkirk spent days staring out to sea, hardly eating or sleeping. As time passed and no rescue came, he focused on survival, subsisting on shellfish and fish. Weeks turned into months, and Selkirk began to realize the harsh reality of his situation, isolated on the remote island. The struggle. The initial months of isolation on the island were incredibly challenging for Alexander. Accustomed to a life surrounded by people, he struggled with the profound loneliness of his situation. However, he gradually began to reframe his perspective, drawing on his faith and convincing himself that God had provided him with the necessary resources for survival on the island. He initially relied on seafood and seals for sustenance, but as the seasons changed, he encountered new challenges. The beach, once his main food source, became overrun with aggressive sea lions during their mating season. Additionally, the onset of colder weather prompted him to construct a shelter in the forest using materials that he found on the island. Despite his efforts to create a safe haven, he faced another obstacle: rats infesting his shelter and disturbing his sleep. Drawing on his knowledge of maritime practices, he realized that cats were effective in controlling rat populations. He managed to tame some feral cats, which not only kept the rats at bay, but also provided him with companionship. His resourcefulness extended to his diet as well. He foraged for vegetables and experimented with native fruits and vegetables, supplementing his meals with wild game and seafood. Over time, he became adept at navigating the island's terrain, exploring its nooks and crannies while honing his hunting skills. However, his newfound confidence nearly proved fatal when he suffered a serious fall while attempting to hunt a goat on a cliff. Despite the injury, he managed to crawl back to his hut and recuperate, reflecting on the fragility of his existence and the possibility of dying alone on the island. To leave a mark in case of his demise, he began inscribing his name and the date of his stranding on trees around the island, creating a makeshift memorial of sorts. This practice served as a reminder of his mortality and the precariousness of his situation, motivating him to persevere despite the challenges that he faced. After spending several years on the island, Alexander's clothes and bedding deteriorated. However, his experience as a tanner and the presence of goats allowed him to fashion new garments and blankets from their pelts. He also improvised tools, often finding replacements washed ashore. While he remained hopeful for rescue, the arrival of a Spanish ship heightened his caution. Hiding from potential captors, he navigated the delicate balance between longing for rescue and fearing the consequences of being found by hostile forces. Despite his resourcefulness, the constant threat of capture tempered his hopes of being rescued. The Duke and Duchess. After 4 years stranded on the island, Alexander finally spotted a ship, the Duke, anchored near Tierra. Overjoyed at the prospect of rescue, he signaled the crew with a beacon made of gathered wood, eventually attracting their attention. When the crew landed on the beach, Alexander, initially struggling to articulate his thoughts after years of solitude, eagerly welcomed them and offered them hospitality in his hut. Despite his reluctance upon seeing William, the former captain of the ship, Alexander eventually agreed to join the crew after learning of William's changed circumstances and impressive endorsement. Subsequently, Alexander resumed a seafaring life, eventually amassing wealth and continuing his adventures until his untimely death from yellow fever in 1721. Despite the hardships, Alexander cherished his time on the island, reflecting fondly on the simplicity and contentment he found there, even amidst his newfound success and wealth back in England. What would you do if you faced a similar situation? Join us next time as we delve deeper into the realm of human resilience and the power of the human spirit. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated for more captivating stories. Until next time, remember, the greatest adventure begins when we least expect it.